Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ike Online. Welcome to Dear Mr. President, one of our Constitution Day programs. My name is Julie, and I'm an educator with the Eisenhower Foundation here in Abilene, Kansas. So I was just texting a friend of mine, which is what we do, right? When we want to tell a friend something and they're not like sitting right next to us. We don't even really think about writing a letter. I mean, it would take 4 or 5 days to get it to the person that we wanted to tell something to. People have said that letter writing is a lost art, especially in this day of emailing and texts and instant messaging. But did you know that letter writing makes a powerful impression? And if sent to the president, it's kept in the archives forever. Incidentally, today we are going to be looking at letters written to President Dwight Eisenhower. Right now, I'm sitting in front of a picture of President Eisenhower's Oval Office, where he served as president from 1953 to 1961. In this program, we're going to be sharing letters written to President Eisenhower. We're going to be doing some research and analyzing them to find out more about the history during that time. And we're also going to find out how to write your own letter to the president as well. Let's start with the Constitution and what it says about contacting our elected officials. So the First Amendment of the Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. And this last part is what we're talking about today, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So what that means is we can contact our elected officials for any reason, even if we have a complaint. This really packs a punch. And it was very important to George Washington and our other founding fathers. Before America was an independent country, we were under the rule of the King of England. Now, do you think that you could just go to the King's castle and say, "Hey, Mr. King, I want to talk to you a minute"? No, you could not. Only certain people could address the king or talk to the king. And even then, he may not listen to them. And you really did not want to go and complain to the king, hard telling what he would do then. So our founders and those who wrote our Constitution knew that if America was going to be different, they needed to give people the right to speak to their leaders without fear. What does the Constitution not say about writing to our government leaders? Does it say anything about being a certain age? No. Does it say anything about having a certain amount of education? No. How about, do you have to be a voter? No. You can be anyone, any age, and still be able to write to our elected officials. All right, so how exactly do we contact the president? Well, we could use the internet, send an email. We could certainly try to call him. We could even maybe stand outside the White House with a megaphone. But the president has social media managers, and he doesn't give out his personal phone number. I don't know that yelling into a megaphone would work. He might not want to listen to that. So even though we have technology that the founding fathers never even dreamed of, writing a letter is still the best way to contact the president. President Eisenhower received thousands of letters from kids just like you, and all of those letters are kept safe in the Eisenhower Presidential Library, right here in Abilene, Kansas, where I'm sitting. Anyone who wants to read them can. They're allowed to do that. And we're going to take a look at some today. First of all, let's talk a little bit about primary sources and secondary sources. That's pretty important. So what are primary sources? Well, they are evidence from the past. They vary widely. They could be objects like photographs, artifacts, autobiographies, maps, movies, newspapers, and even letters. The key is that they were created during the time period being studied. The Eisenhower Presidential Library, Museum, and Boyhood Home are full of primary sources. Secondary sources are a little different. Most of the time, we are learning from secondary sources. These are things like textbooks, teachers, your parents, websites, which are the result of someone learning about a topic and then teaching it to you. And those are great tools to learn from. But when we learn with primary sources, you actually get to hold a real piece of history in your hands and come to your own conclusions. As I said, the letters that we are going to be looking at today are primary sources. And when we're looking at primary sources, we need to go through a process to understand it. So we start by examining and analyzing it. We ask a lot of questions about the source itself. Who created it? When did they create it? Why did they create it? What is it made of? Is it similar to anything I am familiar with? What do I already know, and what do I want to know? Since we have a short time together today, we're not going to actually do any actual research, but I'm going to go through that process with you. And when you have more time, hopefully after the program, maybe you can do some research on your own or do some research as a class. And I'm always happy to answer any questions the best I can about that. Remember, what kind of source am I? Primary or secondary? I'm a secondary source, right? So hopefully you received copies of the letters that we're going to be taking a look at today. If not, that is okay. You can follow along with me on the screen. And we're going to examine the first letter together. So take a look at the letter written by a girl named Phyllis Ann Barnes. There's also a typed letter to make it a little easier for you to read. Let's take a look at that letter. It says, "Dear Mr. President, I am Phyllis Ann Barnes, and I'm in the 4th grade at Jesse Hunter Black School. I've heard lots of people complain about our country and government, so I am writing this to tell you about how much I love my country. I like the beautiful mountains, streams, parks, lakes of Minnesota, big trees in Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Indians of New Mexico and Arizona, the wide open prairie of my own home state of Kansas. I also like the smooth, wide highways that our taxes help pay for. And it is because of this we pay taxes. So at our house, we do not mind paying taxes. And I also like the privilege of choosing my own Sunday school, friends, pets, TV shows, food, and clothes. It sure makes me feel good inside when I hear the Star-Spangled Banner and when I hear you talk. I can hardly wait to see our new flag. It sure does make me feel safe when I see the big bombers go over our house. I pray at night that we never have to use them. I think you are a very nice president. My daddy said that anyone that wanted to write to the president, anyone could write to the president, and so I am, to thank you for what you are doing for us. Sincerely yours, Phyllis Ann Barnes. And guess what? Phyllis received a letter back from President Eisenhower. And there is a picture of that letter, and this is what it says. Dear Phyllis, thank you so much for your nice letter. Our country is a wonderful one. We love its beauty as we cherish the freedom it offers us. That is why we must all work and pray and perhaps sacrifice to preserve it. With best wishes to a fine young citizen, sincerely, Dwight D. Eisenhower. So there have been many kids who have written to the president and have received letters back. However, we also know that the president is a very busy person and can't answer everyone's letter. He's got a lot of work to do. Reading these letters can be more than just interesting. Letters can tell us a lot about history and what was happening in our country at the time those letters were written. And so that's what we're going to be doing now. So put on your sleuth detective hat, and we're going to analyze some letters written by kids to President Eisenhower. You're going to find out some amazing things. So if you have this letter analysis sheet, you can use that to kind of help you record the information that we learn. If you don't, no problem. You just take out a piece of paper and write it down on that. Let's start with a pretty easy question. Question number 1, who wrote this letter? That's right, Phyllis Ann Barnes. And how did we know that? We know because at the end of the letter, she signed her name right there. Number 2, what year was this letter written? Okay, do you remember where to look for that? That's going to be on the first page up at the very top. That's right, 1959. And she wrote the date that she wrote the letter along with her address, which is her home is in Wichita, Kansas. Right up there. All right, question number 3. Why did she write the letter? What was its purpose? This is a really interesting question because we can't ask Phyllis, can we? She's not here with us, but we can get some pretty good clues. Let's take a look at these options on our sheet and see what fits best. Okay, so number 3, why was this letter written? Check all that apply. So did she say thank you? Yeah, yep, she sure did. We find that in that last sentence. I want to thank you for what you are doing for us. All right. Did she want to complain or share a concern? Did you hear any of that in her letter? No, I really didn't either. To show support or encouragement. Yes, I think she definitely wanted to show the president support and encouragement. And we're going to share some examples of that in just a minute. Did she ask any questions? I don't know about that. Are there other things that she talked about? She did have some other things that she talked about. She first writes that she wants to tell the president how much she loves our country, right? We find that in her third sentence in the letter. Remember, she says she hears about other people complaining, but she wants to tell him how much she loves her country. All right. Question number 4. All of these letters that we're going to be talking about today tell us about life in the 1950s. So what does this letter tell us about that time period? This is where it gets really interesting. We're going to analyze and infer, ask some questions, and do a little research. For example, Phyllis says something about a new flag. I had questions about that. Let's dig into that. So I remember I said that we have to infer, make an inference. So that just means to come to a conclusion from clues and brain power, what you already know, rather from obvious statements in the letter. So what Phyllis actually wrote was, I can hardly wait to see our new flag. We have a good clue to help us make our inference. Okay, what flag is she talking about? She's from Kansas. Is she talking about the flag from the state of Kansas? Is she talking about some other flag? Well, she's writing about how much she loves America. So I'm going to infer that she must be talking about the American flag. But we still need to dig deeper and do some research. So my biggest question is, why did America need a new flag? I've never known America needing a new flag. All right, back to question number 4. If we had time to go through the whole research process, it might look something like this, but I helped you out a little bit and did the research ahead of time. Okay, so our text says, I can hardly wait to see our new flag. And many of you are wondering, what new flag? Why would America need a new flag? So thumbs up, were you wondering that as well? Right, well that's great to ask questions. Asking questions to learn is always a good thing. All right, so to do some simple research, we have to come up with some terms, right? We could put in the term new flag, the year 1959. We know that she lived in Wichita, Kansas, in the United States. Let's do a quick Google search and see what those terms and clues bring up. Okay, here are our findings. So a new flag must be created when new states are admitted to the Union or to the United States, okay? Alaska, oh, this is interesting. Alaska was added in January of 1959 as the 49th state of the Union. President Eisenhower's executive order provided that a new flag be created with 49 stars. Oh, okay. But I found out more. Hawaii was added in August of 1959 as the 50th state of the Union or the United States. And so President Eisenhower's executive order provided that a new flag be created with 50 stars. Oh my goodness. So they needed 2 new flags, didn't they? All right, well, here's another question. Which flag was Phyllis talking about? Was she talking about making a new flag with 49 stars? Or was she talking about making a new flag with 50 stars? How could we find out? What clue in our letter could give us the answer to that? That's right, the date. The date on Phyllis's letter was March 8th, 1959. So knowing that date, which flag was she talking about? The new flag after Alaska was admitted to the Union, or the new flag after Hawaii was admitted to the Union? You're right, Alaska, right? Hawaii wasn't admitted to the Union until August of 1959. So Phyllis was talking about a new flag with 49 stars to represent Alaska. All right, so let's add that answer to question number 4. America is getting a new flag because Alaska became a state. All right. Now, is there anything else about this letter that you might have had questions about? Phyllis wrote in her letter, this is something that I had a question about. She likes the smooth, wide highways that our taxes help pay for. So I wondered, what new highways is she talking about? Why is that a big deal? There are highways everywhere, right? Well, at that time, no. Research revealed that the Eisenhower interstate system began in 1956. There was no interstate highway system before then. There were maybe a few highways and a lot of roads that weren't very good. The first stretch of interstate was completed right here in Kansas, and it made traveling distances much faster and safer. All right, so Phyllis and her family definitely appreciated the new highway system. And she also talks about feeling safe that military bomber planes are flying over her house, but she hopes they are never needed. So I did some research on that too. Remember, she lived in Wichita, Kansas, and in 1959, Wichita had a very large military aircraft manufacturing plant. So it would make sense that she would often see test flights in and out of Wichita. So you would also learn from the research that the US was in something called the Cold War with the Soviet Union. So the Cold War meant that there really weren't any shots fired or bombs going off. But there was a real threat and fear of nuclear war. And so that must have been on Phyllis's mind. And we can speculate that Phyllis probably heard about this on the news, or maybe from her parents talking about it, or her teachers. So yes, the US was preparing for another possible war. Did you find anything that you might have in common with Phyllis? That's one of my favorite things to do when I am researching, especially researching people. We can always find things that are different because they're from a different time, but it is so cool to find ways that you are similar to them and like them. Maybe you're in the same grade as Phyllis when she wrote this letter. Maybe you're from Kansas. Maybe you also appreciate the beautiful things of our United States. Let's take a look at some more primary sources. We have a couple more letters from kids to President Eisenhower. So that means that these, again, are primary sources that were created between January of 1953 and January of 1961, because those are the 8 years that Eisenhower was president. All right, so let's find this letter written by Linda Hay. And again, it's typed for you, which makes it a little easier for you to read. And it says, "Dear Mr. President, our school is out. I got a perfect report. I want to thank you for my 2 polio shots. Mother says she trusts you with a capital T. Us 5 kids pray for you every night. Donald is just 3, and he puts you in with our dear black Sambo cat, who is lost. I will be 7 August 12th. An awful lot of folks love you. Your friend, Linda Hay. All right, and what is the date on this letter? A little hard to read. Up at the top, it's 6/28/1955, or June 28th, 1955. All right, so let's kind of see if we can answer some questions through this letter. Why do you think she wrote this letter? Did she want to thank him for something, encourage him, suggest an idea, ask a question, complain about something, or something other than that? She definitely wanted to thank him, right? She wanted to thank President Eisenhower for the polio shots. She did provide him some encouragement, didn't she? Mom trusts you, we pray for you, along with their lost cat, Sambo. Right. Did you have any questions? What questions came to mind? You know, I kind of wondered about the polio shots. Shots are kind of painful. I was surprised that she thanked the president for her polio shots. You know, most children get polio shots before they go to school, but why do you think Linda is thanking President Eisenhower for her polio shot? Well, I did a little research. Polio is a very serious disease that affected many young children before 1955. A doctor named Jonas Salk came up with a vaccine or shot that prevented polio. President Eisenhower said he never doubted the effectiveness of the shot. And the shot became available for children to take on April 12, 1955. And when did Linda write this letter? June 28, 1955. You know, I bet she was probably one of the first children to get her shot and her booster. Pretty cool. All right, our next letter is by Stephen Levy. All right, and if we looked at the top, what is the date on the letter? December 21st, 1950. All right, and we can kind of tell it's written in December because he's got Merry Xmas written at the top, which is short for Merry Christmas. Okay, well, let's see what Stephen has to say. It says, "Dear Mr. President, I don't think it is fair to make children go to school all year. The only fair way to decide if school should be all year is to have every child who goes to school in this country and the parents and teachers vote. Suppose you had school all year and every teacher did not like the idea and they quit. Then there would not be anyone to teach us. The teachers and children should be with their family for 2 months. Sincerely, Stephen Levy." Okay, so our first question is, why did he write this letter? Was he thanking the president? Ooh, not really. Yes, definitely to wish him a Merry Christmas. He was upset about going to school all year, right? Or at least the idea of going to school all year. He has some strong feelings about that for sure. So, why do you think kids had to go to school all year? Well, I did a little research. So I looked up school education in the 1950s, and I found that the National Defense Education Act of 1958, that was the year that Stephen wrote this letter, was signed by President Eisenhower to strengthen schools academically. Now remember, I told you that the Cold War was going on, and a part of the Cold War was the space race. And there was a big concern that the Soviet Union maybe was more knowledgeable with science and math. They were kind of at that time ahead of us in the space race. And so President Eisenhower wanted to make sure that schools emphasized science and math. And so this act, this National Defense Education Act, prioritized science and math. Now, I also found out that they didn't have to go to school all year. So I think maybe Stephen was just really afraid that because of this, they were going to have to start going to school all year. But that never happened. So I'm sure Stephen was very pleased with that. All right, now it's your turn. If you want to write a letter to our president, what are some things that you would like to write about? Think about the letters that Ike received. Some were serious, some were fun, and just friendly. What are some issues or maybe concerns that you have? Some of us might be concerned about homelessness, the environment, maybe inflation. Or maybe you just want to talk about your pets, your family, what's happening in school, what your hobbies are. Those are all perfectly good things to mention to the president. I also want to mention that, thinking about Stephen's letter, it was probably the closest to a complaint, wasn't it? He had some pretty strong feelings about going to school all year. But was his letter rude? No. And that is a good rule for all of us to follow. Whether or not you like what the president is doing doesn't really matter. If you're going to write him a letter, it needs to be kind and respectful. And you can absolutely say, this kind of upsets me, or I don't like this. This kind of makes me feel angry. Just do it in a respectful way without name calling or insults. It's always a good idea to write a rough draft or a sloppy copy, and then go back and correct any mistakes that you see before sending a nice, clean copy of your letter. Did you notice some mistakes in the letter the kids wrote to President Eisenhower? Yes, sometimes mistakes slip through the cracks. Just do your best and ask for help if you're stuck. And then how do we get our letter to the White House? So you may have received some information about how you get your letter to the White House. If your whole class writes a letter, your teacher can send them in all in one bundle. She can also give you the right address to send your own letter. Or you can go to www.whitehouse.gov/get-involved/write-or-call/, which will also give you information on how to send a letter to the president. All right, and remember, writing a letter is your right as an American citizen to ask questions and share opinions with our elected officials. And guess what? Remember at the beginning, I mentioned that all letters written to the president will be entered into the official files of the U.S. government, just like the letters sent to President Eisenhower. It will be preserved in the presidential archives as part of our American history, and will have a permanent home in that president's library. So you have an opportunity to make history, just like the kids who wrote letters to Ike. That is pretty cool. All right, before I go, are there any questions that you would like to ask? So today we have learned about primary sources versus secondary sources, how to begin analyzing a primary source, how primary sources like these letters to President Eisenhower can reveal information about the author and the time period in which they were written. You can practice your right as an American citizen to question and share opinions with our elected officials. I want to thank you for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great Constitution Day.